We will. So Annette, when we went into lockdown, I think you were actually on, not actually at that moment on stage, but you were appearing at the Liverpool Everyman. Is that right?
That's right, and you play by Jonathan Harvey, Our Lady of Blundell Sands.
So how long had you been in that play?
We'd only just opened the previous week, so it was, and we had very good notices. So it was just heartbreaking. We had producers, West End producers, arriving the following week. And we'd gone home, when we were in preview, we played Mondays, but when we opened the play, we had Mondays off. So I'd come back down on Sunday morning to an absolutely empty train. I had maybe 2 other people on the train with me. And the guard, I spoke to the guard about it, came trundled down to London. My partner was also in a play at the Donmar, so he went in on the Monday afternoon and was just turned around and told to go away.
Wow.
And that night I got a call from the Everyman saying, we're having a meeting this evening, but it looks like we're not going to be able to continue. And then Boris made the announcement, which he never told theatres to shut, he suggested that they should. So it left, the onus was on them to make the decision. So they decided that we couldn't continue, but we all had to go back on the Tuesday, and we had a little meeting, and they were very generous, and the whole theatre came down, and we had Prosecco and sandwiches, and it was a very pleasant way of separating and hoping we'd return. Whereas poor old David, my partner, had just been told at the stage door, go home, and was bereft, and that must have happened to a lot of actors, just turned away and told that's it.
Horrible thing to happen.
Well, I wonder about all those sets that are sitting in theatres all over the country, just waiting for us to go back, like little ghosts, sitting,
see what's
waiting.
Happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it had been, as I say, good notices, and we were a good company, 6 characters. So you do go into a little bit of mourning for it. It just didn't feel finished. We were only just beginning to run with it, and because it's all so frightening to begin with, and you do the first previews and you do the press night and you steel yourself, you get through that, and then you begin over the course of the run to take possession of it and imbue it with even more than you found in rehearsals, and that was just torn away from us.
Really hard, but really hard to cope with. I think we've probably got most people watching now, so I'll kind of I now want to officially introduce you. I'm sorry I didn't do that. I should have probably done that at the beginning, but welcome to all of you watching. I'm absolutely delighted. We've got about 155 people on at the moment, and I'm sure more will join as we go along. But many of you will know Annette from all sorts of things. Midsummer Murders. Some of you will remember her from Bergerac. I know we get that comment whenever we feature you, Annette, that you were the Secretary Charlotte in Bergerac. Am I right?
Yeah, yes. You're absolutely right. So going on to Midsummer, I've sort of chased John Nettles through his career. I haven't given up on him, but though he's not in Midsummer anymore, made a mistake there. You see, he wasn't there.
So you've been, and you've played all sorts of interesting characters, of which the last nasty one that you were playing was Babe Smith in EastEnders, and also my memories of you are as the extremely horrible Hazel Woolley in The Archers. So I'm an avid Archers fan, so I knew you from that. But anyway, we're absolutely delighted to have your company this afternoon, and really to hear all about everything, really, your experience of lockdown and the future for the arts and all that kind of thing, and a little bit about your career. So I'm sure everybody's going to really enjoy hearing all about that. So I mean, since that terrible day when you had your, we've now got to say goodbye to all of you and head off back on an empty train to London. How have you been coping with lockdown generally?
It's varied. My partner's shielded, so I'm the one and I'm just short of 70 and everything, so the onus fell on me to, manage everything, and I found it very difficult to begin with because I couldn't get deliveries, and I couldn't, I really struggled with all of that. Lots of gardening, I love my garden anyway, so, you know, spent and
Whereabouts are you actually, Annette? Where do you live?
Northeast London, going to
Oh.
out towards Epping Forest, and initially, before we knew what it would be like exactly, I was saying, oh well, we can take day trips to the sea, we can go into the forest, and then of course all of that was denied. So, and the forest was very strange. In the latter days when we went, it is blocked off. There are double red lines everywhere. There are concrete bollards have been put in, and there were just 2 little sections that you could park in. But of course, because David was shielding, he didn't feel he wanted to get out with absolutely everybody in a car park. So we came home, we just had a little run round and came home. I have cleaned cupboards. To my own surprise, I haven't. I thought I would use the time to read a lot, but I somehow wanted to be practical, and maybe because I'm not here a lot, because I do work quite a bit still, it was an opportunity to kind of be in the house and know it again, and know things I love, and turn them over and have a look at them, and
get things done.
Dust the books, and yeah. And David and I have fared pretty well, which is great for 4 months. You know, I
talked to me earlier about lockdown hair.
Lockdown locks.
Lockdown hair, yeah.
Yeah, I've got my appointment on Saturday morning, 11 o'clock.
Have you?
But I'm going to keep the colour as long as I can. I've always, well, not always, but for the last few years, wondered about taking one of those razors to my head and seeing exactly what was under there. And this has been the perfect opportunity. Now I know what's under there.
It looks lovely. It's a lovely colour. It's a fantastic colour.
Yeah, but I don't think I'll be allowed to keep it for work. You know, people like going back to Midsummer. When it does eventually kick in again, I suspect they won't want it. You know, they'll want the character to stay the same.
Right.
But now at least I know a bit more about myself now.
Okay. So you think you'll have to put colour back into your hair for the acting? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, they might say it's okay, but I suspect not.
Okay. So let's talk about some of the characters that you have played, and I'm always fascinated when actors play a role that really goes against type, if you like, because I've met you a few times now, and I know that you're actually an extremely pleasant and very charming person.
Thank you.
So when I see you playing characters, because you were a particularly nasty character in EastEnders, am I right? Tell us a little bit about the character that you played in EastEnders. How long did you play her?
Oh, it was nearly 3 years. I was doing another series called Outlander when they asked me to join, and as a children's series called Wizards versus Aliens that Russell T Davies had written. So I was doing Outlander, went and did a few episodes, say 4 episodes of EastEnders, went away, finished Outlander, came back, did another few episodes, went away and did Wizards, and it started just before Christmas, and then by June I was properly free and joined them properly. I was Danny Dyer's wicked auntie. But I always defend her. I always, I think you have to love your characters. You have to find a way of engaging and loving the person you're playing. And I just felt she'd never been loved. Any scenario that happened all her life, she'd been rejected and no one had really loved her. And that made her resentful, and that triggered other things in her, and she became very unpleasant. She had done baby farming with young girls when she was much younger, before she came into the storyline. And EastEnders was odd because it was the first, because I have played other villains, it was the first time that I found the audience only saw me as her. And I found that very difficult, you know, on a tube, or it wasn't, is it Annette? Or I don't know your name, or it's Annette Badland, isn't it? I saw you in, I liked it, I didn't like it, and they were. Whereas with EastEnders, they go, "Babe, are you all right, babe? How's babe? Are you all right, babe?" And they saw me as her, which is extraordinary for an actor. You know,
wow.
it's,
Yeah. I did wonder about that. If if you're playing a strong character like that, that's not particularly pleasant. When you are out and about in London, you get recognised, but you get recognised as the character.
yes.
It's like, you want to say, I'm not actually that person.
Yes, I know. I think soaps are particular, I think, because you're in people's homes all the time, so they engage with you as the character.
Yes.
But it was the first time I really had encountered that at all. That.
And it wasn't very glamorous either, was it, Annette?
No, it wasn't. Much better in Midsummer. I've got a lovely black Jag convertible to drive now, and a motorbike.
Yeah.
Much better than the three-wheeler and and the maroon Cardis. That
must be much nicer, I have to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how about you've had a very long career. I mean, you obviously went to drama school, am I right?
Yeah, went to East 15.
And since then, have you worked more or less continually, or have you had longish periods of
no, I've been very, very lucky. Very, very lucky. But I'm interested to work in all the media, and I'm also interested in new young writers and directors. And I, when I started, had friends who would go, "Oh no, I wouldn't go and do," it was all theatre, and I wouldn't do television. Or, "Oh no, well, you don't know about that young person. No, you must do something. Wait for Harold Pinter to write you something." So it meant I worked a lot, because I'd go, "Oh yeah, I can fit that in, and that's great, and I'll go and do that." And radio, I love, I was open to things, and therefore worked in a lot of different sections of the arts. So I think that...
You were, in the early days, you were at the RSC?
Yeah. I went and worked, initially I went to the Actors Company, which Ian McKellen and Ted Petherbridge, Caro Blakist and Sheila Reid, a group of actors had got together, and they had turned the tables, and they hired the director didn't hire them. And I was an acting ASM. Felicity Kendall was in the company, and she was pregnant, and they'd said to me, "You'll take over from her as the maid in the Fado farce alongside Ian." And of course she would not stop acting. She just carried on all through her pregnancy. So I never got to go on as the maid in Fado farce. But so we had small acting roles, and setting the props up and everything, and they were great with us. So I did that straight out of drama school, then went to play Mole in Toad of Toad Hall at Lancaster Playhouse, and then the following year went into the RSC and did things like Audrey and As You Like It and Hostess and Shrew, and I was with them for about 3 years, both in Stratford and at what was then their London home, the Aldwych. So,
lovely.
yeah.
And so tell us some of the highlights. Looking back, what are the very best bits that you remember?
Oh, well, the play was The Rise and Fall of Little Voice, with Jane Horrocks and Alison Steadman, which we did at the National and then at the Aldwych, when it was no longer owned by the RSC. A film on 4 that I did, which was a short Ian McEwan story from his collection of First Love, Last Rites. And it was just a perfect little story, and I had a young boy to work with, and we got on very well. I got on well with the director. Nick Nolan was the cameraman who went on to work with Spielberg and things, and he was fantastic. So that was sort of an idyllic experience, and because it was Ian McEwan, the writing was good, and so I treasure that very much. Things like Outlander of recent, I had a fantastic time. The crew are wonderful. I love Ron D. Moore, the producer. Kat and Sam and I got on very well. So, I'm sure when we stop talking, I'll think, oh, but then there was, but there's only ever a handful of things that you really really treasure, because it's a dicey business, you know. You get on with the director and it's a great script, but the leading actor is a poor, you know, is just awful to everybody, or the leading actor's wonderful and the director can't direct, and it's or you're in a costume you can't walk in, or so the thing when it actually all comes together and is terrific is quite rare.
And how about being on the stage as opposed to being in film, and or which medium do you prefer? I
love theatre. It's where I always wanted to be. I like film. Television, like EastEnders, studio-based television is the hardest, because it gives you it doesn't feed you at all. It's a very dead atmosphere, and it's a created set, and it doesn't artistically feed you in any way, whereas if you're on a film and you're in a set, you absorb the atmosphere in the building you're working in. And theatre, you know absolutely why you're doing it, and if you can make the audience laugh, and if they don't laugh, you know you're not doing it properly, or you can make them cry, you can make them laugh and then make them cry. And it's a collective. It's wonderful to have that encounter with a huge group of people.
Yeah. I was listening to Helen McCrory on Desert Island Discs yesterday morning, and she, you know, it was really fascinating. And she was saying how she threw up. She actually was sick every time before she went on stage, and how she just would get so tense and so worked up, and then, you know, would throw up. And but then when she got on stage, you know, it was completely different. Yes. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with nerves and going on night after night after night and so on? How do you?
Well, she's right. It doesn't stop. It just doesn't stop. And that's part of the thrill of it too, that you go through that hell, and then you have the experience on stage with the audience, and then you have their response, and that's the drug that keeps you going. You know, you go, yeah, I want, you know, you're living on the edge. You really are. I know it sounds mad when it's acting and things, but you are exposing yourself absolutely, both emotionally and physically, and trying to share something. And if that's rejected, it's extremely painful. And but you know you're alive. You really know you're alive, and it's yours. Once you're out there, you and the other actors, it's in your gift, whether it works or doesn't. Or whereas filming, it's about the editor, it's about the director and the editor and how they can put something together. I was once in a film and with Tim Roth, and he was in prison, and I was another prisoner's wife. And Juliet Ormond was the prison dentist, and she started a relationship with Tim. But in that was another smaller story, where eventually one of the prisoners set himself alight in his cell.
Gosh.
And when we had the cast and crew showing, the director said to me, I haven't dared tell him the whole storyline's cut out.
Oh.
And she was going to have to tell him before the showing of it. But that's what they can do in film. It can or they can turn something around completely or eradicate it. You know, it's so in theatre it's yours.
Yes.
It's your immediate response to the audience.
And how do you come down from that at the end of an evening? I always wonder that whenever I go to theatre. There's two things I always think of, especially if I go to a matinee, which I often do on a Saturday on my own. I come out and I think they've got to do all that again. Yeah. Which I think is unbelievable, especially if it's a very demanding play and there's a lot of emotion in it, and you know, various characters have had to, you know, my goodness me, have they ever worked hard for the you know, in it for the afternoon, and then you think they're going to do that all again. So that's one question. And then how do you, at the end of the evening, how do you come down from that?
It often takes hours. You know, that's why, you know, you tend to stay together and have a drink, and then after a play, you just can't sleep. You're still alive with it, and how it went and what you could do, and how, you know, how you could alter it, and certainly for me, I like a matinee day, however difficult the piece is, because you are then oiled. You always, I always do a warm up before a play anyway. So I've, you know, run up and down and done voice exercises, and if you're lucky and you're in a company, you can often do them together, but some companies aren't interested and you're just on your own. So I feel quite oiled by the evening, however difficult or strenuous it has been.
Rather than
it's just put you into a different place. And I try not to let go too much in the break, you know, not just put it aside completely. It still inhabits me.
Yeah. And how do you feel about the situation for older actresses? It's always, you know, it's often said it's a really tough industry as you age, especially when you're a woman and so on. Do you see that getting easier, or is it still quite challenging? Are you still being offered plenty of stuff that you're interested in?
Yes, it is tricky. I thought of starting a movement, woof. Women only, old and fat is what I'm. There aren't, you know, there simply aren't. Certainly in modern drama, things. That was the wonderful thing about Blundell Sands. Josie Lawrence and I were the two leading characters, and it was two, you know, more than middle-aged women leading a play, and it had both humour and great sadness and depth to it. So thank you, Jonathan Harvey. But it isn't normal to take an older woman and investigate what she might be going through. The piece with Glenda Jackson was brilliant, and that was wonderful. Yeah. That it was so well received and was such a good piece of
brilliant. Yeah, wasn't she? I mean, Glenda Jackson's quite an interesting woman because she came out of acting, and for a long time she was a politician, which I always felt, you know, I never felt that sat particularly well with her somehow. I don't know why. But then she went back into acting. I think the first thing she did was Lear, wasn't it?
Yes, I mean, and she was tremendous in that as well.
I mean, she's well into her 80s now, and the memory, you know, just being able to master that, I just thought it was breathtaking. And then that play that she did, I mean, she had Alzheimer's, didn't she, in that play?
Yes, yeah.
And gosh, she was
and Glenda herself still smokes, you know, she's still not giving any of it up. But they don't seem to be interested in our stories. Even female writers aren't really fulfilling the brief.
No.
And there's an awful lot of stories to be told. I mean, a tremendous amount will come out of COVID, I think.
Yes.
I imagine initially things will be, oops, sorry, kick the stand. Okay. I think a lot of the stories will be light to begin with because people won't want to examine it too much, and we're just coming out of it, and we need not froth, but you need humour, I think. And then as time goes on, people will absorb and examine it, and stories will come out of it, and there will be many. And just from my own friends, the things they've been through and the stories they could tell of it, you know, it's
yeah, I mean, there'll be a very interesting reaction to this pandemic, won't there, in lots of ways. We were chatting about this a bit earlier when we were talking. What are your fears and worries about the theatre in the next little while?
Will we have a theatre? Yeah. I think it will be much diminished. I worry for the regional theatres, particularly all the smaller ones. We've already lost a couple. The Lyceum at Edinburgh has gone into mothballs. They don't intend doing anything till October next year. So it's very frightening if you've got the National and the Globe saying we don't know where our funding's going to. We need help.
Yeah.
I think there'll be less done. I think, and then it's worrying. You know, they'll obviously, because every actor in the country will want to work, they'll go to the very top 4 smaller things and they'll want to do it because everybody wants to work.
Yes.
I think we'll be hungry for theatre. I think the appetite will be there. I assume cinema will come back first because it's easier to manage, and it can be like a shop, and you know, have your distanced line and have seats apart, and you could have a whole cinema showing the same film in many houses and deal with it that way. theatre is much, much more difficult. And how do you manage with the staff? And, you know, when we were closing, we were asked how we felt. And I said, well, I'm prepared to carry on, before we knew how bad it was. I said, but you've got to think of all the people at the front of house, the box office, and the,
absolutely,
you know,
there's all those jobs.
Yeah,
so many jobs, aren't there, that you just don't think of. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, doesn't it? In terms of the loss and so on. I heard a thing this morning. It was Helen Mirren. She was talking on Radio 4 this morning, and she made a very interesting comment, which is optimistic. And she basically said, "Look, we're a creative industry. We'll be creative. There'll be creative things which will come out."
Yes, yes. And I mean, we're talking about pop-up cinemas, but I don't know how possible a pop-up theatre would be. You know, outdoors and drive-in, and because you're so distant. Yeah. It would be all right for a musical, or, you know, you could maybe do it that way. Yes, they're talking about street theatre, but England isn't great for, in winter, you're not going to want to do that. No. But it certainly is a creative industry, and the people need it and thrive on it, and they will want it to happen, I think. So producers are going to have to get their thinking caps on and try their darndest. Of course, smaller theatres, it's hard for them because they have a huge educational arm usually, which helps fund them. And in the crisis, of course, that isn't happening either. So adjustments will be made there too, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of doom and gloom and fears and worries, I'm sure. But at the same time, we just don't know what will come out of it, do we? You know, I mean, I'm the eternal optimist, and I think what you just said there was so true. I think people will be so hungry and so sorry, I've got an ice cream.
An ice cream arriving.
I'm in my daughter's bedroom because she's got a better internet connection to mine at home, and that ice cream van comes every afternoon at top of the floor.
Hooray! Hooray! Maybe on bandstands or cricket pavilions, or you know,
creative, interesting ways for things to emerge. I'm sure that will happen. I mean, let's hope so, because my goodness me, we are going to want to be entertained, and you know, we, as you say, we're going to want humour, but I think there's always a place for some more serious stuff as well.
Yes, well, that's why it needs tempering, doesn't it? It's and then I think the more, you know, when we're more distanced from the immediacy of it, writers, David Hare, you know, people will write very pungent
about it, about the experience. So, Bryony, where are you? Are you there?
Hello. Am I popping up?
Yes, there you go.
I can hear Bryony and see her.
So Bryony, can we have some questions for Annette that people have asked?
Lots of questions come through. Lots of questions come through on the chat, and lots of questions come through in advance by email as well. So thank you everyone for sending those in. And also a good mix of questions as well. So I'll try and whip through as many as I can. So we had a question from Carolyn and a very similar question from Jackie. What was it like working on Doctor Who, Annette? And who, which actor was your favourite Doctor?
Oh, well, Chris, because he was my Doctor. Though I love David Tennant as well. I started with William Hartnell, was the first one I watched. Way back at the beginning.
A very different questions. We had another message from a different Caroline. She was also born in Birmingham, and she wanted to know which school that you went to growing up, and also were you encouraged by your teachers to go into acting?
No. To the latter. Okay. I went when we were still right in Birmingham. I went to Selly Park. I lived on the Pershore Road, which is by Edgbaston Cricket Ground. So I spent my first 12 years there, and then we moved out to a smaller town called Tamworth. So I went to a school called Perrycrofts. But it was Parents' Day. I got to enact a character on Parents' Day and felt the audience and thought, ooh, I'm an only child. So, ooh, I can make these people react. Right, fine. So that was when I was about 10. And then when I got to secondary school, the drama teacher I turned to and asked if she would give me lessons on a Saturday morning. So I used to go and save my pocket money and go and get classes from her. And then I went, Lambda external exams, one of the drama schools has external examinations. So I, again, saved my pocket money and went and did that, because the youth theatre, the National Youth Theatre, was far too far away for me to access. So I couldn't do that.
Okay, lovely. A question from Pauline. She wants to know how you keep your skin looking great after wearing all of the stage makeup that you have to wear. What's your sort of routine?
Well, stage makeup now tends to be quite much lighter. I mean, we started with grease paint and literally sticks of grease paint when I was young, mixing the colours. And but now, because of lighting being far superior, it's much easier. I still wash my face. I have girlfriends who don't wash their face, so I use a cream to take it off. And you know, I'm not very good with my toner. I don't tend to. I often skip that, but I like to wash it. So I have a cloth. I use a cloth, a muslin cloth, and I love moisturizer. My skin loves it now. It just goes. Thank you very much. I'll have some more of that. And I have to say, I've just been trying the new eye cream, and it's so light and lovely. Yes.
We have to tell everybody, Annette, you were a customer of ours for a long time, and then Caroline, who's our head of customer services, spotted your name, and she's a bit of a thesp herself. She's a bit into the whole world, and she said, I wonder if that is the Annette Badland. And that's when we contacted you, because we saw that you were a customer, which is absolutely brilliant.
We had quite a few people who are involved in amateur dramatics that reached out to us, and they wanted to know that as they're getting older, they were saying that they're finding it increasingly more difficult to remember their lines, and they wanted to ask if you've got any tips or tricks on how they can actually sort of memorize those lines easier. No.
Repetition. It depends how good the script is. Goodness knows what I'll be like after COVID. I haven't been learning a sonnet a day, or I am learning a poem occasionally. And as I said, I have worked a little bit, so I have had to learn lines to keep everything oiled and not, you know, atrophying. But if it's a good script, I find it comes relatively easily. But repetition is my own. I walk, say it and walk about, so the energy. Apparently, it helps you learn if you're not just static. If you move with it, and so I tend to do that. And my partner's very good, and he gets to play all the other parts, and I do mine. And then he has to put up with me going, I'm never going to learn this. I'm never going to. This is awful. I can't do it. And then he just goes over it again, and we gradually get there.
We had a question from Susie. She wanted to know that she'd heard there's a lot of hanging around sort of in between takes for TV and films, and she wanted to know, do you have much time to spend on hobbies that you can do on set, or is it more sort of you just chill and talk with the other cast members, etc.? What do you like to spend your time doing?
I tend to stay in the zone, so I like things that don't, you know, like Dame Judy used to do tapestry and, you know, things like that. And you can, don't know if you can see, I've got these, I made these and I knitted that. So something that keeps the motor running but doesn't take me away from what I'm doing, because half my brain is still thinking about what's happening and what I've got to do. So I'm not very good. I don't like reading on set particularly. So I find smaller occupations, things I need to clear up, bits of paperwork or things I need to do but won't really take all of my energy or thought.
And then just one final question, which, I mean, a lot of people had very similar questions, and you have already covered this in your discussion with Tricia, but a lot of people just want to know, sort of, obviously with the impact of COVID-19 and the theatres, etc., how are you imagining what it will be like, and when do you think that they really will open? When's the earliest you can see sort of the theatres in London opening?
I think they'll try for Christmas because that's a big season. Nationally, they will try and do something, pantomimes, and for the State of the Nation too. But I think realistically, it's probably going to be next year before anything major can happen.
Yeah.
But you know, whether they can take big arenas and, you know, just move venues and do something, but it's distance, isn't it? Then it's not like a rock concert. You can't go to the O2, or then we're back on screen, you know, you're in a big auditorium and you'll have it transmitted on screen, which isn't quite the same experience. But I know there's such a drive to achieve it, that it will happen as soon as it possibly can.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's good to know. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Tricia, I'll hand back to you.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Bryony, and they were great questions. So my final thing is just to thank you, Annette, very much indeed. That was absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm sure everybody has really enjoyed watching this and hearing everything that you've got to say. So thank you very, very much for joining us. And can I thank all of you who've been watching? We've had a tremendous audience for this, and thank you also for participating in your smaller groups. So goodbye, and I hope you'll join us again. We'll have another Zoom conversation in a couple of weeks' time. So bye-bye, everybody, and thank you.
Goodbye, everyone, and thank you. It's been wonderful. Whizzed by.